I want you to picture something, a specific feeling. You're driving maybe through a city you don't know that well. It's loud, traffic's a mess, the usual chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And then you turn a corner and it all just stops. The noise fades, the road is suddenly perfect, the lawns are like surgically manicured, and right there, stretching across the road, is a barrier.
A boom gate.
A boom gate, maybe
Yeah.
a little guard booth with a guy in a uniform who just kind of stares you down.
It's such an immediate, visceral shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know instantly you've crossed some kind of invisible line.
Exactly. And that line, that barrier, that's what we are going to obsess over today. We are doing a deep dive into the gated community. And I don't just mean, the Del Burca Vista retirement village from Seinfeld.
Right.
We are talking about a truly global phenomenon, one that is, I think, fundamentally reshaping how we live together, or maybe more accurately, how we are choosing to live apart.
It really is a fundamental shift in the social contract. I mean, for centuries, the idea was the open city. The streets were public space. They belonged to everyone.
Yeah.
But this is the enclave model, where the street itself becomes a private product, something you buy.
And that's really the core question we need to get at today, isn't it? Is this product actually worth the price? Is that gate a sanctuary that keeps all the chaos out? Or is it more of a fortress that just locks the anxiety in?
Well, looking at the research we've pulled together, the answer is it's incredibly complicated.
Complicated is putting it mildly, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see that in some places, these gates are purely status symbols. In others, they're straight-up survival mechanisms. And in some really surprising data sets we're going to get to later, they might actually be traps.
Okay, before we go down that rabbit hole, and I definitely want to talk about the trap aspect, we need to be precise. Because I feel like I use the term gated community for, any apartment building with a fence.
Right, and that's a common thing.
But the source material is pretty strict here, so what officially counts?
So, to be really accurate, we aren't just talking about a building with a locked front door. A true gated community, or a walled community, as it's sometimes called, has to meet a few specific criteria. First, obviously, it's a residential area.
Okay.
Second, it has to have strictly controlled entrances, and that's for everyone. Pedestrians, bicycles, and especially automobiles.
So no cutting through the neighborhood to avoid that traffic light.
Absolutely not. And that's the third and probably most critical feature, the closed perimeter. We're talking about actual walls or fences that completely encircle the development. And crucially, the streets inside are almost always private property.
Ah, so they aren't maintained by the city.
No, they're maintained by the residents through their fees. The Homeowners Association, the HOA, owns the asphalt.
Which brings us to the anatomy of these places, because once you get past that guard, once you're inside the wall, it's not just a bunch of houses, right? It's a whole ecosystem.
Well, that really depends on how much you're paying. And this is where the anatomy of an enclave gets really fascinating. If you're in a smaller, maybe a lower fee community, the big amenity might just be a patch of grass they call a park. And, that feeling of exclusivity.
Just the gate itself is the amenity.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But when you scale up, it becomes civilization in miniature. It's a bubble.
I was looking at the list of amenities in some of these high-end developments, and it reads like a billionaire's fever dream. I mean, swimming pools and tennis courts, okay, sure. But bowling alleys?
Bowling alleys, marinas for your yacht, full-service spas. I've seen architectural plans that include on-site, fine dining restaurants that are exclusively for residents. You can't even get a reservation unless you live there.
Wow.
And the newest trend is co-working spaces.
That makes so much sense. If you're working from home now, why would you ever need to leave the fortress?
That's the entire sales pitch, self-sufficiency. Now, there is a little nuance here. If you live in a high-rise condominium, a sort of vertical gated community, you'll almost always have a pool and a gym.
Because you can't build one in your apartment.
Exactly. But in those huge, sprawling, single-family home communities, you might not see a communal pool. Because the assumption is that if you can afford a house there, you can afford to build your own backyard oasis.
So what are the common amenities there?
It's more about social signaling, the massive clubhouse, the golf course, the things that say community but are really about status.
Okay, so we've got the what, but I really want to understand the why. Why do we build these things? I have to assume it's not just because we all secretly love to bowl in private.
No, it's much deeper than that. The economic models, they really break down into four main categories, and this helps us understand the motivation behind the wall. First, you've got lifestyle.
Okay.
Think of those huge retirement communities in Florida or Arizona, or golf resorts. You're not just buying a house, you're buying a prepackaged bundle of activities and like-minded neighbors.
Right, you're paying a premium to be around other people who also want to play bridge at 2 in the afternoon.
Exactly. The second model is prestige. This is where the gate is basically a velvet rope at a nightclub. It isn't really about safety. It's about signaling. It's about saying, I've arrived and you, well, you have not.
The real estate agent isn't selling a home, they're selling an ego boost with a 2-car garage.
Precisely. The third, and this is the one most people think of, is physical security. This is the fear-based model. The gate, the guards, the camera, it's all explicitly there to control traffic and, theoretically, stop crime.
We'll put a pin in,
It's
theoretically.
a very big pin. And finally, you have purpose-designed communities. These are often built for expatriate workers. The most famous examples are the oil industry compounds in the Middle East. They're designed to create a little home-away-from-home bubble for foreigners.
There's a distinction in the notes here that really caught my eye, and that's the difference between a gated community and a closed city. Because honestly, to me, they sound like the same thing, a place I can't get into.
They sound similar, but legally and economically, they are worlds apart. A closed city. Think of those secret nuclear research towns in the old Soviet Union, or maybe a large military base. That's public exclusion.
Public exclusion.
Yeah, the guard at that gate is a government employee. They're paid by tax dollars. The exclusion is a state function.
Okay, got it.
A gated community is private exclusion. The guard is a private security employee, paid by the residents' fees. The roads are private property. And this has some really weird real-world consequences, especially for, like, public infrastructure.
You're talking about the bus stop issue?
I am. It's such a perfect illustration. In a normal city, a bus route can evolve to serve the population. But a public bus cannot legally enter a private gated community without an easement, a formal legal right-of-way.
Which the residents would never grant.
They rarely do. They don't want the noise, they don't want the fumes, and frankly, they don't want the type of people who ride the bus coming into their enclave.
So the bus just stops right outside the main gate.
Right across the street from the guardhouse. And it creates this incredibly stark visual every morning. You have the domestic workers, the gardeners, the nannies, the construction crews. They all get dropped off on the public road and have to walk through the checkpoint on foot.
While the residents glide past in their luxury cars.
It's a daily ritual of separation. And it also, funnily enough, messes with their utility bills, which I found kind of hilarious. You'd think these affluent communities would have all this leverage, but they often get fleeced.
How does that work?
It's all about bargaining power and legal status. Because the community is a private entity, like a corporation, they often can't rely on the same government regulations that protect individual public residential zones from price hikes.
They're treated like a business.
More or less. They lack the legal quorum or the standing to negotiate those legally fixed public tariffs. So the utility company can charge them a higher commercial rate.
So you pay a premium for the house, you pay a premium for the HOA fees to maintain the gate, and then you pay a premium for the electricity to actually run the gate that keeps everyone else out.
It's the hidden cost of admission for that sweet, sweet seclusion.
All right, let's pack our bags. We have defined the beast. Now it's time to see where it lives. We are kicking off our global tour. And I think most people, myself included, assume this whole story starts in the suburbs of America.
It's the origin story, for sure. At least for the modern version. Though, the very earliest gated communities in the U.S. actually go back to the 1850s.
Really?
Yeah, a place called Llewellyn Park in New Jersey is often cited as the first. But those were like country estates for the robber barons, the ultra-wealthy industrialists.
Not for the average person.
No. The explosion, the real democratization of the gate, that's a 20th century story. It's a post-war story.
And specifically the Sun Belt boom.
Exactly. Florida, Arizona, Southern California, Texas. It's really just a function of land availability. It's incredibly hard to gate off a pre-existing grid of streets in Manhattan or Boston.
The city's already there.
Right. But if you're a developer and you've just bought 1,000 acres of empty desert or swampland, you can throw a wall around the whole thing before you even pour the first foundation. It's built into the design from day one.
There's a massive number here in the source. By 2009, over 11 million households in the U.S. were living in gated communities. That is not a niche market. That's a significant slice of the population.
It's huge. But we need to bust a myth here. We have this image that these are all bastions of affluence, all mansions.
The lifestyles of the rich and famous idea.
It's just not true. And this is a really crucial point. Ed Blakely, who is basically the godfather of academic research on this topic, he makes a key distinction. He separates them into prestige communities and security zones.
Okay, what's the difference?
Prestige communities are the ones you're thinking of, the country club set. But security zones are often much more modest. The research shows that gated communities actually contain a huge mix of socioeconomic classes. There are plenty of middle-class, even lower-middle-class, gated developments with townhouses or apartments.
So it's not always about wealth preservation. Sometimes it's just about the appearance of security for anyone who can scrape together the monthly HOA fees.
That's it, exactly. It's a product sold to the middle class's anxieties. And this, of course, leads us directly into the really difficult conversation about segregation.
Yeah.
The main critique is that these communities balkanize society. They break us up into these little homogeneous tribes based on income.
But you found a study that challenges that, or at least nuances it a bit.
Well, it adds a layer of complexity. It was a 2015 study in the journal Urban Studies, and it argued that while gated communities absolutely entrench social segregation, that is, class separation, they didn't necessarily worsen racial segregation in the U.S.
Okay, my brain just did a little flip. Why? How is that possible?
Sadly, it's because the neighborhoods were already so segregated to begin with. The demographic patterns of the surrounding streets were already racially distinct due to decades of other policies and practices.
So the wall just physically solidified a boundary that society had already drawn.
That's a perfect way to put it. The wall didn't create the racial divide. It just poured concrete over it.
That's almost more depressing. Okay, let's move south. Because if the U.S. story is about lifestyle and anxiety, the story in Latin America seems to be about something much, much more raw.
Inequality. That is the one-word answer. That is the engine driving the boom down there. When you look at a country like Mexico, for example, the income gap is just staggering. You have the global, ultra-rich living, sometimes literally shoulder to shoulder with extreme, grinding poverty.
And when the state can't or won't guarantee your personal safety, the market steps in and sells it to you.
And we see that on a scale that is hard to comprehend in a place called Interlomas, which is in the greater Mexico City area. It's considered the largest concentration of gated communities in the entire world.
How big are we talking?
About 140 square kilometers.
Yeah.
It's not a neighborhood. It's a privatized city-state.
So they must have their own everything?
They do. The large developments have their own schools, their own private water treatment plants, their own power grids, their own private fire departments, and ambulance services. They have completely and utterly opted out of the public infrastructure of Mexico.
But what I found so fascinating about the situation in Mexico is that it's not just the super rich doing this. You mentioned these legal gray areas.
Yeah, this is the road gating phenomenon. It's incredible. In many working class or middle class neighborhoods, the residents feel completely abandoned by the police. So they take over the public street.
They just do it themselves.
They just do it. They'll illegally erect steel barriers, put up chains with a padlock, and maybe hire a local guy to sit on a plastic chair all night and watch the entrance.
And the city government just lets them.
Yeah. The city government largely tolerates it. They know the police force is stretched too thin and often too corrupt to provide real security.
Yeah.
So they essentially allow the residents to privatize and secure their own block, even if it completely violates urban planning laws.
That feels like a total breakdown of the social contract. The government is basically saying, we can't protect you, so good luck, do whatever you want.
It's urbanism as a survival strategy. And we see a much more formalized version of this in Brazil with the condomínio fechado.
The closed condominium.
Right. This really took off during the military dictatorship in the 1970s.
Yeah.
You had this perfect storm of factors. A massive rural exodus into the cities was causing overcrowding and strain on services.
Crime rates were spiking.
Crime rates were spiking, and you had a new booming car culture among the middle and upper classes. So the wealthy did what the wealthy often do. They fled. They left the chaotic city centers for these new, secure, master-planned suburbs.
And the archetype for this is Alphaville, right?
Yes, just outside Sao Paulo. The name itself, Alphaville. I mean, it sounds like something out of a dystopian novel.
It sounds like a place where they clone people and everyone wears white jumpsuits.
It's not far off in spirit. It was marketed as a perfect city, high walls, electrified fences, private security patrols, absolute control. It became the template, the ultimate status symbol for the upper class in Brazil. It says, I have successfully escaped the chaos of Brazil.
And in Argentina, they have a different name for them. They call them countries.
Yeah, which is short for country clubs.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the social dynamic there is really intense. Living in a country is an undeniable sign of wealth, But for a lot of the rest of society, it's seen as incredibly snobbish.
Yeah.
There's a real stigma attached to the nouveau riches who are seen as hiding from the real Argentina behind their walls.
There's a term the sociologists use here that I found really powerful. They call them violent environments. Can you explain that? Because usually we think of the slum as the violent environment and the gated community as the peaceful one.
That's the paradox. The sociologist isn't talking about physical violence, gunshots inside the gate. They're talking about the violence of the architecture itself.
The architecture is violent.
Yes. When you build a massive 10-foot concrete wall topped with razor wire that cuts right through the urban fabric, when you create a hard physical border that implicitly says you on the outside are a threat, you are not worthy to enter here, that is a form of social violence. It enacts a brutal separation between the elite and the periphery.
It's an aggressive act of urban planning.
It is. It's an architectural declaration of distrust. And we see that playing out across the region, from Nordelta in Argentina, which is so big it has its own hospitals, to new developments in Uruguay, where remote work is now making them more accessible to the middle class.
Before we jump across the ocean, we have to talk about the great outlier. Canada. Canada. Why are you so different?
Canada is so fascinating in this context because hard gating, the actual locked gates across roads, is extremely rare, almost non-existent in major cities.
Is that just a cultural thing? Like it's too impolite?
That's part of it, for sure. But it's also largely a legal and logistical issue. Municipal planning laws in places like Toronto and Vancouver often outright ban locked gates on public access roads because of emergency vehicle access.
Right. Fire trucks and ambulances need to be able to get through without waiting for a code.
So public safety regulations actually prevent the security measure. Instead, what you see in Canada is implicit gating.
Passive-aggressive gating.
That is the perfect term for it. Essentially, yes. Think of the town of Mount Royal in Montreal. It's a very affluent area, and it's separated from the much more working-class Park Extension neighborhood by a long decorative fence along a major boulevard.
But it's not locks.
No lock, no guard. You can just walk around it.
Correct.
But it creates a powerful psychological barrier. It subtly signals this is a different kind of place. You don't really belong here, without physically stopping you.
Which is almost more effective in a way. It relies on people internalizing the rule and policing themselves.
It's exclusion with a polite Canadian accent.
Okay, let's go to part 2 of our tour. We're heading to Asia, Africa, and Europe. And we have to start this leg in Pakistan because the scale of what's happening there just blew my mind.
We have to talk about Bahria Town. If you think the American Sunbelt developments are big, Bahria Town is a behemoth. It's not just one place. It's a series of massive privately owned cities. The developer is the largest private real estate entity in all of Asia.
What are we talking, asset-wise?
The last valuation I saw put their assets at around $30 billion, with a B.
That's the GDP of a small country.
And it operates like one. It's a state within a state. Inside Bahria Town, they are currently building the largest cricket stadium in Pakistan. They've already built the Grand Jamia Mosque, which is the third largest mosque in the entire world.
But the real luxury there, the real selling point, it isn't the cricket stadium, is it? It's the infrastructure.
That's the ultimate status symbol. Pakistan as a country struggles with severe chronic energy shortages. Load shedding, rolling blackouts are a part of daily life for millions.
Right.
Bahria Town has its own power generation plants, its own private electrical grid. When the rest of Lahore, Karachi goes dark, Bahria Town stays lit.
That is such a powerful, almost medieval image. The castle staying lit while the countryside is in darkness. It's not just security from crime, it's immunity from state failure.
It is a completely customized reality.
Yeah.
And we see a different but equally powerful kind of customized reality in China.
The tale of two Chinas, basically.
Exactly. On one extreme, you have the ultra-luxury compounds for the new elite. Places like Clifford Estates in Guangzhou. We're talking 247 guards, but also facial recognition systems just to get in your own driveway. Very high-tech, very exclusive.
And on the other extreme...
On the other end, you have something much darker. You have the sealed villages, specifically for migrant workers. In places like Beijing's Daxing district, the government itself has built walls and gates around entire neighborhoods that house the rural migrants who come to the city for work.
Wait, so this isn't rich people walling themselves in. This is the government actively walling poor people in.
That's precisely what it is. The official party line, the rationale they give, is crime reduction. They put out statistics saying it drops crime rates by 73%.
But critics have a different take.
Of course. Critics argue it has very little to do with crime and everything to do with social control. It's about tracking a transient population, segregating them from the real citizens, and making sure they can be monitored and managed.
That is a chilling inversion of the entire concept. The gate stops being a symbol of freedom from the outside world and becomes a tool of containment.
It completely blurs the line between a community and a camp.
Let's shift to the Middle East. Saudi Arabia has a long history of this, largely because of the oil industry, right?
Yes, the Western compound is a staple of life there for expatriates.
Hmm.
Originally, back in the 70s and 80s, it was really just about providing a cultural bubble, a place where an American or British oil engineer's family could live by familiar Western norms.
Where they'd have a swimming pool, women could drive inside the walls, that sort of thing.
Exactly. But then, history happened.
The late 90s and early 2000s.
A wave of targeted terrorist attacks against Westerners in the kingdom completely changed the nature of these places. The gates went from being decorative entryways to full-blown military fortifications.
What did that look
We're
like?
talking concrete blast walls, multiple checkpoints, marksmen on the roofs of buildings, and in some cases, Saudi National Guard armored vehicles permanently stationed at the entrance.
That's not a community, that's a bunker.
It's a fortress lifestyle. It reflects a very specific, very high-stakes threat model that you just don't see in most other parts of the world.
Now, for a moment of almost unintentional comedy, let's go to Indonesia. You flag this as the public rule paradox.
I find this absolutely fascinating.
Mm.
So in Indonesia, developers build these lavish, exclusive gated communities. But there's a national regulation that says any social facilities inside a residential development, so parks, sports grounds, community halls, even mosques, must eventually be handed over to the local government for public use.
Wait. So you buy $1 million house in an exclusive gated community for the privacy, but the law says any random person from the outside has to be allowed in to use your tennis court.
Technically, yes. The gate is there, but the legal requirement punches these invisible holes in it. It creates this constant simmering tension between the residents, who think they bought a private club, and the local public, who legally have a right to access the space.
I can only imagine the neighborhood Facebook group drama that causes. Who are these people in the swimming pool?
It totally undermines the entire value proposition of the gate. It's a mess.
Okay, let's move on to Africa. And South Africa is probably the most cited, most studied case of this phenomenon outside the United States.
It is absolutely central to the academic literature on this. After the end of apartheid in 1994, the number of security villages, or complexes as they're called there, it's absolutely mushroomed.
Mushroomed implies they popped up practically overnight.
In many places they did. And the driver was just visceral, palpable fear. Fear of the country's very high rates of violent crime, for sure, but also a very specific fear related to property rights.
The fear of squatters.
Exactly. Developers and homeowners are terrified of land invasions or squatters occupying a property because the legal eviction process can be incredibly difficult and can take years.
So the wall goes up first.
The wall is a preemptive legal defense. You wall off the empty land before you even build the house to establish ownership and make sure no one else can claim it.
And the proximity there is just so stark. You have these first world islands of incredible wealth surrounded by a sea of severe urban poverty.
That's what the urbanist Vanessa Watson calls the African urban fantasy. And you see it in Nigeria, too, with these massive estates like Gorimpa. It's an attempt by developers to build a new Dubai or a new London inside a city like Lagos or Cairo that is still struggling with the most basic infrastructure.
And it just widens the gap.
It limits class interaction to almost zero. The only time the rich and the poor meet is when the poor are serving the rich inside the walls.
Finally, let's swing by Europe. Why is it the odd one out in all of this?
It really is the great exception. Hard, physical gating is just very, very rare in most of continental Europe. There's a much stronger tradition of urban planning, a sense of the right to the city. The idea of a private individual blocking off a public street is culturally and often legally offensive in Paris or Rome or Berlin.
But the UK is dipping a toe in the water.
A little bit. But it's interesting to look at the marketing. In the U.S., they sell you community. Come join our neighborhood, have a BBQ with the Joneses.
Right.
In the U.K., when you see these small gated developments, usually for Premier League footballers or young city bankers, they don't sell community, they sell asset protection.
It's an investment strategy.
It is. The pitch is, buy this flat, it won't get burgled, so your resale value will remain high. It's a much colder, more financialized transaction.
And we can't end our tour without at least mentioning Russia.
The ultimate oligarchy. The source material brings up O0, which was the cooperative formed around Vladimir Putin's dacha back in the 90s.
I feel like calling Putin's compound a gated community is a bit like calling the Pentagon an office building.
It's certainly in a league of its own, but it operates on the exact same core principle: total, absolute separation from the laws and realities that govern everyone else.
So we've toured the entire world. We have seen the high-tech walls in China, the blast shields in Saudi Arabia, the passive-aggressive fences in Canada. Now we have to ask the big question, the one that actually matters to the millions of people living in these places. Do the fences even work?
And this is where we get to the paradox of security. And honestly, this is where the story gets really, really disturbing.
Okay, so the proponents, the guys selling the condos, they have a very clear and simple theory. It's called defensible space.
Right, this comes from the architect Oscar Newman. And the idea is, on its face, very logical. If you restrict access to a space, you reduce the number of people in it. If you reduce the number of people, you can recognize strangers instantly. If you can recognize strangers, they can't commit crimes without being noticed.
It sounds like pure common sense. Fewer people, less crime.
It does. But then you have the counter-argument from the legendary urbanist Jane Jacobs. She argued for the exact opposite. She championed the idea of eyes on the street.
More people is safer.
Precisely. She said that safety doesn't come from walls and guards. It comes from people. It comes from the shopkeeper sweeping his stoop, the grandmother looking out her window, the constant random flow of pedestrians walking by. They are the natural surveillance system of a healthy city.
So if you build a wall and you eliminate all that random pedestrian traffic.
You remove the eyes. You create a sterile dead zone. And if a criminal does manage to get inside, there's nobody there to see them.
And the actual data, the hard numbers, they seem to support Jane Jacobs, don't they? Tell me about that study from South Africa.
This is the one that should be on a billboard outside every new development. It's a study by Britske, Landman, and Cohn from 2014. They looked at burglary rates in the city of Tshwane, which includes Pretoria. Now remember, the #1 reason people buy into these complexes in South Africa is to avoid burglary.
It's the entire sales pitch.
It's the entire reason for their existence. The study found that the density of burglaries was 4 times higher inside and immediately around the gated communities compared to the rest of the city.
4 times
Yeah.
higher.
Yeah.
That is a catastrophic, unbelievable failure of the product.
It's shocking. It's a finding that is so counterintuitive that you have to read it twice.
So why? How is that even possible?
Well, let's say like a criminal for a minute. If you are a professional burglar and you're going to risk going to prison, where do you go to work? Do you go to a poor neighborhood where there's very little to steal and a lot of people sitting on their porches watching everything?
Yeah.
Or do you go to the place that has explicitly advertised itself as a warehouse of concentrated wealth, where everyone leaves for work at the same time, and which is surrounded by a nice high wall to hide you from the street?
It's a honeypot. The wall is a billboard that says good stuff inside.
It's a target-rich environment. And once you breach that perimeter, and there are many ways to do it, you can bribe a guard, you can follow a resident's car in, you can just cut the fence in a poorly lit area. Once you are inside, the walls and the lack of public traffic start to work for you.
Because nobody from the outside can see what you're doing.
Exactly. You are hidden in plain sight. Police patrol cars can't just randomly drive by on their beat. They need permission to enter private property. You have effectively created a private hunting ground for yourself.
That is absolutely terrifying. You pay all this money to lock yourself in with the very threat you are trying to escape?
And that's not even considering the insider threat. These communities rely on armies of low-paid service workers, guards, gardeners, cleaners, domestic help. They have intimate knowledge of the residents' schedules, the security gaps, the blind spots in the camera coverage.
And when you have that level of inequality right there, a wall is just a minor inconvenience. It's not a real barrier.
It's just a challenge. So not only does the gate often fail to stop crime, but it has this wider corrosive social cost. The researcher Setha Low talks about its negative effect on net social capital.
What does that mean?
It's the idea that when the affluent and the influential withdraw from the public sphere, that public sphere begins to collapse from neglect. If the wealthy don't use the public park, they don't vote for the taxes to fund the public park.
If their kids are in private schools inside the walls, they don't care if the public schools are falling apart.
If they have private security, they don't care if the police force is underfunded and ineffective.
So the city outside the wall gets worse and more dangerous, which makes the people inside the wall even more afraid. So they demand higher walls and more guards.
It's a death spiral. It's a vicious cycle of fear and withdrawal. and it depletes the social capital, that basic layer of trust and interconnection between citizens that actually keeps a city safe and vibrant in the first place.
This anxiety, this idea that the perfect, safe community is actually a trap. It's not just in the academic data, it is all over our culture. We are obsessed with the idea of the rot behind the perfect facade.
Pop culture absolutely loves to tear down the gated community. It's a favorite trope for exploring hypocrisy and hidden darkness.
Let's start with the zombies. You have to start with The Walking Dead.
A classic and perfect example. In the comics and later in the show, Rick Grimes' group finds this perfect-looking gated condominium development. It's got walls, it's got fences. It should be the safest place on Earth.
But it's not.
It turns into an absolute death trap. First, because it's already infested, but more philosophically, because the gate makes you soft. It creates a false sense of security. You stop paying attention, you stop being vigilant, and that's when you get bitten.
Then you have the whole genre of social satire. The Stepford Wives is the ultimate text here.
The idyllic community where everything is perfect because the women are robots. Or you get the Truman Show vibe. There's an old Twilight Zone episode called Evergreen that the source mentioned.
Oh, I don't know that one.
It is so creepy. It's this perfect, manicured, gated community. But when teenagers get rebellious or don't fit the mold, they're taken to a special factory and turned into fertilizer for the immaculate green lawns.
That is not subtle.
No, but it speaks directly to that deep fear of conformity. The fear that in order to live in these perfect places, you have to kill a part of your soul. You have to become fertilizer for the system.
Even SpongeBob SquarePants got in on this.
Squidville. It's a brilliant episode. Squidward finally escapes SpongeBob and Patrick and moves to a gated community populated only by other squids who are just like him.
It's his paradise.
For about a day. He plays his clarinet, he rides his bike, he enjoys the peace. But then, the days start to blur together. The crushing uniformity and boredom drive him insane. He starts playing with a reef blower just to feel something, anything different.
Even Squidward needs a little chaos in his life.
We all do.
Yeah.
Humans crave variety, spontaneity. The gated community by its very nature offers uniformity. And ultimately, that's boring.
There's also a powerful class commentary in film. Parasite is the one everyone knows now, but the notes mention a Mexican film, La Zona.
Yeah, La Zona came out years before Parasite, but it hits on a lot of the same themes. A group of poor kids from the slum next door break into a wealthy, gated community. It results in a death, and the residents decide to handle it themselves, turning into a private lynch mob.
Wow.
It's brutal. It shows the raw violence that is simmering just beneath the surface of that polite, exclusionary lifestyle.
And sometimes real life mimics art in the most bizarre way. I love the Back to the Future story.
The Hilldale paradox. It's perfect.
So for anyone who doesn't remember, in Back to the Future Part 2, Marty McFly goes to the future, to 2015, and his future self lives in a subdivision called Hilldale, which has become this rundown, dangerous place.
Right. But the real-world location where they filmed those scenes, a development called Arbor Oaks in El Monte, California, was actually a very nice, open, middle-class neighborhood.
But because of the movie, fans started flocking there. Tourists, people trying to find the McFly house.
They were constantly driving through. So what did the real-life residents of Arbor Oaks do to stop the unwanted traffic?
They gated it.
They built a wall and a gate to keep the fans out. The fictional story about the future of their neighborhood literally caused them to build the future. The movie was satirizing.
That is the perfect, beautiful encapsulation of this entire phenomenon. It's always a reaction. It's a reaction to a threat, whether it's real or perceived.
It always is.
So let's try to bring this all home. We have traveled from the $30 billion private states of Pakistan to the fearful security villages of South Africa. We've seen that the world is, in many ways, chopping itself up into these little fortified islands of affluence and anxiety.
And we've seen again and again that the promise of the gate, the promise of safety, of community, of peace, is very often a mirage.
It just makes me wonder if the hard data from places like South Africa shows that burglary rates might actually be higher, and if psychologists tell us it can make us more anxious and fearful, and if urbanists say it ruins the social fabric of the city, what are we really buying?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. We are buying the performance of safety. We're buying a feeling. It's security theater. We pay for the fancy gate and the guard and the crisp uniform to wave at us so we can pretend for the few minutes we're driving down our private street that this scary, unpredictable world isn't out there.
We're buying the ability to turn a blind eye.
That's it. You're paying a premium for the luxury of not having to look at the problems of the wider society. But as the walls get higher and the gates get stronger, You have to ask yourself a really fundamental question. Are we keeping the world out, or are we just locking ourselves in?
Something to chew on the next time you punch that 4-digit code into a keypad.
Or wait for that striped arm to slowly lift? Thanks for joining us on this tour behind the walls. We will see you on the next deep dive.
Stay curious.